Hello, my name is Carol Annette Kramer. I am a member of the Jasper County Conservation Board. This is one of the most important parts of Jasper County. I know that. I was the first woman to be selected to be on this board. I was the first educator, and I was the first Native American. And now we have other women, and we have a wonderful woman director. We have a lot of women that are very, very well trained, educated, and dedicated to natural resources. I also had the honor of serving for under 2 governors on the State Natural Resources Commission, and that also was quite an honor. My Ojibwe name is Wabaskunajins, and that means little unripe blueberry. And you probably noticed that I seem to be a little bit light-skinned for a Native American. That's because way back in I think it was a grandfather that was French. And so when I was born rather light-skinned for a baby, for an Indian baby. And so they took me to my grandfather. Actually, it was my mother's grandfather. His name was Netawash. And he looked at me, and I was a tiny little bundle baby, and he said, "Oh no, I want Wabaskunajins." He said, "Oh, poor little thing, let's get a little white blueberry." And so that's how I got my name. And so I didn't like my name for a long time, but now I think it's okay. But because my brothers used to tease me about being a little white blueberry. So I was born on the White Earth Indian Reservation in northern Minnesota, about 100 miles from the Canadian border. I lived on that reservation in a little village named Pine Point. And I went to school. I went to an all-Indian school in the village, Pine Point Indian School, through 8th grade. So I actually didn't know very many non-Indian children. And we just played together, and it was a school of about 280 kids, and our teachers were pretty strict. Didn't have any Native American teachers, just white teachers. And I lived with my mom and dad, and now we're doing social distancing, which I told Jade that social distancing would have been almost impossible in our house because, first of all, it gets pretty cold. And I had 4 brothers and a sister, and we lived in a 4-room house, which wasn't very big, and we didn't have indoor plumbing or electricity, so we were just kind of close together all the time. I don't know how we ever could have managed to stay 6 feet apart. But I grew up that way. It was a lot of fun. We grew up in a very seasonal way, and when we get to talking later on in another part of this session, you will be finding out more about my Ojibwe heritage, or Anishinaabe, like we call ourselves, which means the first people. I had a father whose name was Majigabo, and that means of standing straight and moving slowly forward. It's a very strong name. My mother is Bishobinashikwe. She is a Thunderbird lady, and that is one of the reasons I do have Thunderbirds sometimes on my beadwork. And my oldest brother was Ajajak. That means a sandhill crane. And my sister was Okwe, and that is, she is a lady. She is a fine lady. And then there was Inini, and that means big man. But we called him Nini, so people thought that was silly, but it wasn't. Inini means a big man. And then I had another brother. Well, then I came along. I was the next one. I was Wabaskunajins. And then I had another brother, and his name was Shingabus. That means a duck that dips into the mud. And I always thought he had a silly name. And then my youngest brother came along when I was 14 years old, and he is named Ojibwe. That means a little chip of a tree. He was the last one. So that is my family. And we had We had a lot of respect for the earth. I'll be talking about that later. We grew up thinking that all animals were our brothers and sisters, and we had to honor them. And we had to honor the four directions of our country and the four directions of nature.
Hi, I'm Maya Vincente, and I go to Aurora Heights Elementary School, and I'm in 4th grade, and I'm volunteering for Jasper County Conservation. And as you know, this is my friend Carol. For school, we were doing a project before this whole thing came down, and we were doing a Ojibwe, a project about Native American people. And they asked us, what Native American tribe do you want to do? And I picked Ojibwe because I'm like, oh, I have a friend that is an Ojibwe, and I thought it would be a good source of information rather than just computers and books, and actually have a person there. So I couldn't think of the name at first, and then I found a picture of her on the internet because you were in the newspaper, and then my teacher, she's like, oh, that was my 6th grade reading teacher. My class got a kick out of that. So, well, and that's how this whole thing went down. So I have a paper here that I'm going to read. So the Ojibwe called themselves Anishinaabe, which meant the people. They were also called Ojibwe, 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 and the Chippewa. By the way, all the Ojibwes are spelled different. It was thought that Anishinaabe lived by the Atlantic Ocean, and they had a prophecy that if they moved inland, they would find food that grew in water. So they ended up in the Great Lakes region, which is Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and North Dakota. I know you already said this, but just a refresher, where was your tribe located at?
Our tribe was located, a lot of the location of the Ojibwe, or Anishinaabe people, are still in Canada, but there are large reservations in northern Minnesota, and Cass Lake Reservation. There's the Mille Lacs Reservation. There is the Red Lake Reservation.
There's a lot of reservations.
Yes, there are 7 reservations, all in northern Minnesota.
Wow. So the food that grew in water was wild rice, and I'm pretty sure Carol has some stuff she's going to talk about wild rice after we do this. And Monoman is what the Ojibwe called it, and it grew 3 to 4 feet into the water in areas too far north. Corn cannot grow, so corn cannot grow there. In early fall, the rice was ripe. People moved from their summer camps to the swamp areas and harvested wild rice. When winter came, the Anishinaabe men spent their days hunting and fishing, and ice fishing, and the women, on the other hand, spent their days making clothing and household items. In springtime, they moved to maple forests to collect sap from the trees and boiled it down into syrup and sugar. They collected bark and birch trees to make containers, shelters, and canoes. In the summer, big groups of families camped together and returned to the same spot year after year. Men spent their days hunting, fishing, and building canoes. Women dried meat and fish, and planted gardens, and gathered berries from the forest. So did you ever have to make stuff for your house?
Yes, I worked in the woods with my father and my 4 brothers, so I didn't do a whole lot of beadwork and that sort of thing. But you talked about what we did throughout the year, and in the fall you talked about wild rice, and we did go to what we called rice camp, and this is where we gathered as groups, and there were wigwams, or in some places there would be a framed kind of a little house sort of thing, and it's sort of like a hut, and that's what my dad had. Rather than a wigwam, he had four walls.
I'm assuming that one was bigger because you have a bigger family.
No, it wasn't any bigger. Huh. When you were in rice camp, you slept you probably sleep, all of you, in a place about this big. And so we would harvest wild rice, and this is a wild rice fanning basket, because my mother and father would go out in the canoe, and my mother had what she called, those are ricing sticks. And those were sticks that were whittled by my dad, and they had to balance. And then you would take the rice and you would pull it over and you would slash at it. You wouldn't hit it this way. If you hit it that way, you would knock the stalks off the top, and then the rice wouldn't, the green rice would not stand up. But if you just hit it sideways, then inside of the boat, all of the finished rice, or the rice that was already ready to be harvested, would go into the boat. And so that's my mother, and she is what they call pounding rice into the boat, and my dad would stand behind her with a push pole, and the push pole would be almost really, really tall, about 20 feet tall. And he would just push it along, and they would probably talk a little bit, but mostly work. And they would bring in all of this rice. And then when you brought the rice in, then you had to parch it over a wood fire. And if you parched it, you had to get all the chaff off of them, because it's like wheat, to get to the kernels. And whoopsie. And my mother would have the rice in here, and she would stand and she would throw it up like that, and then the chaff would fly out and the good rice would stay inside. And then the good rice would, thank you, miigwech, that means thank you. I hope I brought some rice. No, I didn't. I don't have the rice. But anyway, the rice would be finished, and this has to do with something else. So that is a fanning basket, and that is harvesting wild rice in the fall. And then when you go in the fall, you'd go into the winter camp. We didn't have winter camps because we lived in our house, so because we had to go to school. And school was very important to my parents and to other parents too, so that we all went to school. And while we were in school, my father would go out and trap. He would trap beaver. There's a picture of him there, and these are beaver pelts, and that's the skin side of the beaver that's stretched. And then he also sometimes would get otter, and they would be in the trap, and so he would have to skin the otter, and that long skinny thing is the otter. And then he also would trap muskrats. Muskrats didn't bring as much money as the beaver. And the mink. Mink was a very, very important part of his trapping. And then in the spring, we went to Sugar Bush Camp. And Sugar Bush Camp was a lot of fun. And this is where I can show you this piece. My mother and my grandmother used to make these containers, and they're made out of birch bark. And my mother could make these, and they would use these to gather up the syrup, and they never leaked. They never leaked. They would bring it in, and they would be large. This is just a replica I had her make for me a long time ago, and I told her I'd put dried flowers in it. But that's what they would put their sap in there, and then they would take it, and then they would have this big kettle that would have over a fire, and then they would pour that sap in. Have you ever finished maple syrup?
I've seen Greg do it.
Yes.
And then he boils it all down.
And you keep boiling, and they bring it in there, and then my grandma would sit there, and she would watch it boil and boil and boil and boil, and then we would get our syrup for the whole year, and then we would get our maple sugar. And one time we were out in the woods, and I was just a little girl. I was probably 4 or 5 years old maybe. And my little brother, I was 4 actually, my little brother, Frankie, was a baby. And we got stuck out in the woods. And because my father's car went down into the mud, there was a big thaw and the car was stuck there. And so he said, we have to walk out to Fastine's store and take some of our sugar and something and trade it for some flour, because we'd run out of flour. And my mother couldn't even make us pancakes or anything because we didn't have any flour. So we had to walk out to Fastine's store, and it was probably about 2 or 3 miles. I thought it was 100 miles because I was 4 years old. And we were walking, and I got jealous because my dad was carrying Frankie on a pack sack on his back. And my mother was carrying syrup, and my grandma and grandpa were carrying sugar and syrup to go and trade. And I got jealous because Frankie was on my dad's back, and I thought I was my dad's little girl. So I started whining. I'm tired, I'm going to sit down. And so my dad said, I think you all better sit down now. I think you all better just take a rest. You're all tired, and I'll go on ahead. And so he got a big log there that they could all sit on, and my mother sat there holding Frankie. And I was there, and I was sitting there, and my dad said, I'll be coming right back in a little while. And so pretty soon my dad came back. And he came up to me and he said, Wat is gaan jeans? Away die. Waboos. Waboos away to. And he said, my little girl, my little blueberry girl, there is a rabbit up there waiting for you. And if you run, you're going to be able to get that rabbit and carry it. It'll be your pet that you can hold for a long time. And I got so excited. And we started walking, and he put Frankie back on his backpack, and he started walking, and my mother and my grandma and grandpa were going, and I'm just walking along, and I'm looking, and I'm looking, and I'm looking, and pretty soon, guess what I found? There was a rabbit beside the trail where we were walking. A rabbit. It was kind of stiff, and it was kind of cold, but I thought, I found my waboos, and I picked up this old dead rabbit. I didn't know it was dead. I picked up this rabbit, oh, waboos, I said, and I carried it all the way to Fastine's store. My father, I know now, had set some rabbit snares up ahead because he would catch rabbit by snaring them, and that would be, we'd use it for food. And so he had found a rabbit in his snare and just stuck it on the side, and that's how he got me to go walking without whining so much. So I think that pretty much covers that. We went berry picking. We used to go berry picking in the summertime. We'd have berry picking camp. And when we went berry picking, you know, there were 6 children, but we all had to pick berries. Even the little bitty kids had to pick berries. And whenever we went berry picking, we all got a stick of gum. We never used to get gum for anything else, but berry picking we got gum. And now I know that the reason my mama gave us gum was because if you're chewing gum, are you going to be eating berries?
Nope.
I think they were always smarter than us.
That was pretty smart.
That was pretty smart.
Once you spit it out, you...
And we would get a lot of different kinds of berries. We did raspberry picking, and we did blueberry picking. We didn't do so much strawberry picking, but we did a lot of raspberries, blackberries, and blueberries. So you want to continue?
Sure. So the Anishinaabe houses were wigwams, teepees, and they were covered in birch bark and animal skins. And when they moved each season, they took their coverings with them, but left the frame because, well, like you were saying, they came back to the same spot each season.
Mm-hmm.
So you just kept bringing it along, and then it just came back. So.
Right.
And then
We go to the clothing. The next one.
the Anishinaabe made their own clothing out of animal hides, such as deer, elk, or moose. In spring and summer, men wore coverings on the lower part of their body, but in the winter, they wore pants and shirts made of hides. Women wore animal hide dresses year-round, and added leggings in the winter. The Anishinaabe women decorated their clothing with porcupine quills and beads made of shells, bones, and stones. The name Ojibwe, which means puckered, is thought to be named after moccasins or shoes that has puckered stitches.
As you can see, I actually have puckered moccasins on. We call them bakakkusanen. These are bakakkusanen, and that is rabbit fur on mine. And if you notice on my moccasins, there's flowers.
What's that thing above it?
And this,
There's like a flower, and then
then those are leaves. Those are leaves. Those are just leaves, and that's just a decoration. And so, if we can look at this picture, if you look at this picture down here, this is my Grandma Big Bear. She's not my real grandma, but we called all of the older women that were related to us Grandma. And so this is Grandma Big Bear. And when I turned 30 years old, we had moved to Iowa, and my mother wanted to give me something very special. So she went to Grandma Big Bear, and she said, Grandma Big Bear, she said, would you make something for Wabascunagis, for Carol, because she's going to be 30, and I want her to have something special from our tribe. So Grandma Big Bear made this bag for me. And you notice it's all floral. And then she made this side is a different kind of floral design. And so our beadwork is floral, and even with the men would have floral belts, and they would have floral on their. I wish I brought my dad's or Fritz's gloves, because even men's gloves, buckskin gloves, have floral flowers on them. So that I wanted to be sure. And this, I have a lot of beadwork on. This is a little thing that was given to me as a gift, and it's actually called a Jibik bag. And inside here is you can put little things in there that would. If you wanted to have special thoughts for somebody, you could put a little token inside of it. Or if you were mad at somebody and you wanted to hope that they had to cry about something, then you could put something like that in there. And I don't know what's in here. Oh, this is a gift from Loin Dial from the Mille Lacs Band of Chippewa. And it was given to me, actually not by him, it was given to me by my nephew. You know what? That's a surprise, isn't it? It's a surprise for me too. I didn't know that. I never took that out because it was so hard to take out.
Huh. Well, you learned
Anyway,
something new today.
I learned something today. And this is a very typical piece of it's a medallion. We wear these a lot, and the Ojibwe medallions are flowers.
They almost look like dream catchers.
Yes, and here's another one. That's another gift, and that was a flower. Now, this one is a very special gift. This one is made out of all of the teeth of a grizzly bear. So you see that the Indians use everything from an animal. And these teeth came to me in a sack. They were not a nice necklace like I have now. Because when I was on the DNR, on the Department of Natural Resources, and I was getting off the DNR after 12 years, there was a man there by the name of Bill Bird, and he had been up in Anvik, Alaska as a DNR director, and now he's retired and living in Iowa. He had this sack of grizzly bear teeth, and he told me about it. He said, the Indians in Anvik have given me this as an honor gift, and I have to keep it unless I give it to another Native American. So he said, someday I will be honoring you. And when I was leaving, they had a dinner, and I was at that dinner, and they called me up, and of course they were saying funny things about me and that sort of thing. And then Bill came up, and he had this sack, just a plastic sack, and it had these teeth in it. And he said, Carol, I want to honor you with this. And I started to cry because it was such a beautiful honor gift. And the people out there and the audience were all laughing. They thought it was a joke. But it wasn't a joke at all, was it? It was a very much of an honor gift, and I love those. And then my mother did a lot of just plain beading. She would have beads, and she would sit in the evening, and she would just make any kind of necklaces.
I like that one that kind of looks like a spiral
That,
around like a necklace.
yes, I always watched her, and I never knew how to do it. I never learned how to beadwork because I was busy working in the woods with my dad and trapping muskrats. Okay, let's go on,
So,
Maya.
the Anishinaabe believed that they were all connected to the earth, like she was mentioning before. She used every part of the animal's body, and the Anishinaabe, well, I just said that. and they also gave thanks to nature.
Okay.
And the way they gave thanks is by prayers, songs, and dances, and offerings. When the Anishinaabe took something from the earth, they thought about the seventh generation, which means they thought about the future generations. There are 4 sacred plants to the Anishinaabe: tobacco, sage, sweetgrass, and cedar. There were 4 they bring these plants to make an object, person, or place appear. Dreams are important to the Anishinaabe. The word for dream means vision because they thought that dreams told the future. And the Anishinaabe made dream catchers. The good dreams went through the middle, and the bad dreams got caught in the string, and when the sun came up, the bad dreams got burned by the sun. And I think she has
I have a dream catcher
yes.
that I keep in my bedroom, and this is what they look like. And we used to think if we had bad dreams, they would just hit.
I have like a couple of
They'd
those
go
in my
right
room.
straight through. Yeah. So that is our dream catcher. And you talked about the different grasses. And this is my sage. This is what I use more than anything else. And the sage, you would take some of it and you burn it. And this was given to me not too many years ago, that I could burn my sage in here, so I could do it in my house. And you burn it, and then when the smoke comes out, then you should take an eagle feather, and as the smoke comes, you can do this, and then you say some prayers, and that prayers goes up to Gichimanadu, which is the Great Spirit, and you can ask for prayers for people to be blessed, or you can ask for prayers to bless your house. And so you can use sage, but they're also, and all of this has to be blessed by medicine man. So at the powwow, they bless these, and this is what I got last year, and these were all blessed and presented to me by the head of the tribe. And this has cedar in it, and it all smells really good.
Can I smell it?
Yeah. And so this is very old. This belonged to my friend's grandparents, and
Okay. It smells really good.
yeah, feel that. See how heavy that is.
Holy cow.
Yeah, it is really heavy. And so we do burn that, and we do bless things. And it was very when my father would come home after he had killed a deer, and here is my father, and he would kill a deer, and he would. He had to eat the heart and the liver, the first part of the heart or the liver. That had to be cooked first for him. And he had to have that first. But before he ate, he would thank the deer. He didn't make a big deal about it. He would just very quietly thank the deer for giving its life to feed his family and to keep us sustained for the season. And when my mother, we would go out harvesting wild rice, or when she got something from the garden, or the first berries that we got, my mother would take a little spoon and she would go out in the yard and she would dig a little hole and she would put just a little bit of the rice in there, and then she would thank Ichimanadu for giving us the rice. Or if it was blueberries or something, she would just take just a little bit, put it in there, and say a prayer and thank Ichimanadu for the berries for our family.
Did the berries ever grow up in your yard?
No, no, they grew in the woods. The rice didn't grow there either.
Well, it has to be in water, like I said earlier.
Yes, it just went back to the earth.
Yep. The life for the Anishinaabe changed when the Europeans arrived in North America in the early 1600s. Europeans brought sicknesses with them like smallpox, measles, and tuberculosis, and many Anishinaabe people died. Europeans also brought alcohol and guns with them, and with them, and it changed the way the Anishinaabe lived. Instead of only taking what they needed when they hunted, Europeans took as much as they could, which led to animal extinction in some areas. The Anishinaabe did not have any food, and they needed to move to find food to survive. When they moved, it sometimes caused wars because they had to move into other people's territories.
Yes, and my father, he did a lot of hunting. My brothers did hunting. We always had guns, but when they came to the house, they had to clean the gun and hand them to my father, and then he would put them up on a shelf, and the shelf would be locked so that there would never be accidents or anything with guns. And they always had good guns, but they could not understand how people would come up, men would come up and go hunting, and they would kill something and they wouldn't even take it. I mean, they would, you know. So my father didn't understand killing for sport. He only understood killing to feed the family. And my brothers were the same way. And so that was something that they in India, you could say it in Indian, that you kill for the fun of it. And that's wrong. And my father taught a lot of good things to us. And when I was a young girl, I used to get kind of mad sometimes if people were not very nice to me, and especially when I went to a white high school, and I came home and I would be very angry about something they did. And my father explained it this way, and I think this is true today for people that are angry with each other. He says that, my father explained that we all have two wolves in us. You have two wolves. You have a good wolf and you have a bad wolf. The bad wolf is angry, the bad wolf is selfish, the bad wolf wishes bad things on people, the bad wolf doesn't want to listen to the good things. The good wolf, on the other hand, wants to help people. The good wolf is kind. The good wolf is thinking about beauty. And so there's these two wolves inside of you. And he said to me, which one are you going to feed? You can only feed one at a time. So when something bad happens, which wolf are you going to feed?
Did you always say the good one?
I was tried, but sometimes, you know, it doesn't always work. But today, I did something. My daughter turned 60 today, and she asked everyone, she wanted to have 60 people do something good or something nice for her birthday. So today, I was reading on Facebook, and one of my former students wrote a really bad thing in the Facebook. He wrote using bad language about people that wore masks because he said he wasn't going to wear a mask, and he wrote about how people were taking distances, and he was saying bad things about that, and he sounded very angry. And so what I did today is I thought, well, I don't usually write to David, but today I am going to write to him. And so I wrote to him and told him that story. And I said, I want you to know why I wear a mask. I wear a mask because I'm doing this for other people, not just for me. And I also keep my distances because I want to protect my husband who's not feeling well. And I told all of this to David. And then I said, and then I also want to tell you why I pray. Because I pray for people that are suffering. I pray for people who have died because of this, including my sister who died 2 weeks ago, which is true, that is true, what happened to me. And I pray for those people, and I pray for the people that the children who don't understand what's going on. So all of these things I pray for, David, and I even pray for people that are angry, hoping that they might start feeding the good wolf. So I thank my father for that, because his picture is on my refrigerator. And every once in a while, when I'm feeling kind of sorry for myself, and I go by the refrigerator, I look at my dad, and I say, okay, Daddy, I know what you're saying. You're saying, which wolf are you feeding? So that's the end of my story about that.
So in the late 1700s, the United States of America was formed. And the Europeans wanted to take the land from the, okay, I'm not saying this, but savages, they called them that,
Yes.
which was very disrespectful. And they took the land by tricking native people and by force. Anishinaabe kept some of their land by talking with the government. The U.S. government tried to civilize the Anishinaabe by sending their children to boarding schools and making them speak English and made them feel ashamed of their heritage. Today, Anishinaabe still live in the United States, like Carol, and gather maple sugar and wild rice in traditional ways and hold celebrations to keep the cultures and traditions alive, like G does.
That's right. And with the boarding schools, my mother went to a boarding school. They sent her to the boarding school. They took her to boarding school and she was only like in first grade. In her mouth. That was to teach her not to speak Indian.
Well, she didn't know how to.
I know.
How was
I
she
know.
supposed to?
But she had to learn English. And so my mother was always nervous around white people for good reason. You know. And but the way I honor my tradition is I go home to the reservation and I dance in the powwow and I talk to all of my relatives and I have a lot of good time. And if we have time, I would do a dance for you before we stop. It's going to be a traditional dance, and it's done. The music is the people that are the men that are singing are from Panema, Minnesota, and I knew several of them. And this is a traditional Ojibwe dance, and I'm not going to dance the whole 2 or 3 minutes. I'm just going to dance part of it. Okay? This is a woman's dance.